makes sense. Paige never even requested to leave quality assurance. And to hazardous materials, of all places, the HR director's voice dropped lower. Nobody chooses to go there. That's where careers dissolve. Well, the paperwork came through while she was prepped for surgery. Electronic signature and everything. Convenient timing. Wouldn't you say? A male voice, unfamiliar. Margot pushed it through personally. Margot Keene? She's been gunning for that promotion next quarter. The conversation cut off when someone noticed my fingers twitching. I forced my eyes open, blinking against harsh ceiling lights, and the room went silent. The nurse beside my bed patted my hand with practiced gentleness. There she is, she said brightly. Surgery went perfectly. Your appendix is out and you'll be back on your feet before you know it. I tried to speak, but my throat felt scraped raw. The HR director and the man she'd been speaking with exchanged glances before slipping out of my recovery room. 3 days later, as I was changing to leave the hospital, a different nurse helped me gather my belongings. She hesitated, clutching my discharge papers. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't know she didn't tell you. My heart stumbled. Tell me what? She pulled the curtain shut and leaned closer. Your supervisor approved a department transfer while you were in surgery. Her eyes darted toward the door, one you never agreed to. The room tilted sideways. What are you talking about? My sister works in your company's HR. She mentioned it during our call last night. How unusual it was for someone to request a transfer to hazardous materials during emergency medical leave. She touched my arm, especially someone being fast-tracked for advancement. The floor beneath me seemed to disappear. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, of brilliant solutions that saved the company millions, of sacrificing weekends and relationships to climb from entry-level inspector to lead systems developer. All of it vaporized while I lay unconscious on an operating table. My invention. The automated inspection protocol I'd been perfecting for 3 years. The one Margot had suddenly taken intense interest in during the past month. The one that would revolutionize quality control across the industry. The one I was scheduled to present to the board next week. It can't be legal, I whispered, my surgical incision throbbing with each accelerated heartbeat. The nurse shook her head. I wish I could help more, but I thought you should know before you walk back in there. I gripped the edge of the hospital bed to steady myself, mind racing through options that all led to the same conclusion. While I was physically vulnerable, Margot had executed a plan that left me professionally defenseless, and I had absolutely no idea how to fight back. If this story resonates with you or makes your heart race just a little, hit that like button right now. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, drop a comment below. I need to know I'm not alone in this fight. And please subscribe to hear how this all unfolds, because trust me, what happens next changed everything. My name is Paige Avery, and until my appendix tried to kill me last Tuesday, I was on track to become the youngest department head in my company's history. At 32, I designed a quality assurance system that could detect manufacturing defects with 99.8% accuracy, a vast improvement over the industry standard of 91%. The potential savings were enormous, and my career trajectory pointed straight to the executive floor. I'd always been the person who noticed what others missed. As a child, I spotted pattern irregularities that confused even my math teacher father. In college, I double majored in engineering and computer science, graduating with honors despite working 30 hours weekly to cover tuition. When I joined the company, I was determined to transform theoretical knowledge into practical applications that mattered. My apartment walls were covered with whiteboards filled with algorithms and process flows. My dining table hadn't seen a proper meal in years, just takeout containers beside laptop stations and prototype sensors. I'd sacrificed everything for this career, believing the company valued merit above politics. Margot Keene became my supervisor 18 months ago. She arrived with impressive credentials and an intensity that initially inspired me. Her steel gray eyes missed nothing. Her questions probed deeply, and her expectations pushed everyone to work harder. I admired her until I noticed how she absorbed others' ideas during meetings, repackaging them as her own in presentations to upper management. Still, I trusted the system. My work spoke for itself. The data didn't lie. My inspection protocol reduced error rates so dramatically that implementation across all production lines would save the company over $20 million annually. The board meeting next week would cement my place in the company's future. But now, standing in my apartment after hospital discharge, I stared at the email notification on my phone. Workspace reassignment, basement level, hazardous materials division, section 7B. Effective immediately. I called Lena, my closest work friend. Her voice sounded strained when she answered. "I've been trying to reach you," she said quietly. "People are saying weird things, Paige. About my transfer, the one I never requested." Silence stretched between us. "Margot told everyone you'd been struggling with the pressure, that you asked for simpler responsibilities until you recovered." My laugh sounded hollow even to my own ears. I was unconscious when this transfer supposedly happened. How could I request anything? "That's what I thought," Lena whispered. "But Margot showed the team your inspection protocol presentation yesterday. She's taking it to the board herself now." The room around me blurred. "She can't. That's my work, my design, my algorithms. She's presenting it as a collaborative effort that she's been overseeing." "And Paige," Lena hesitated, "they've already moved someone into your workspace. Trey from Data Analytics. He's implementing your system under Margot's direction." My knees buckled. I sank onto my couch, surgical stitches pulling painfully against my skin. "I need to talk to HR. This has to be a mistake." "Be careful," Lena warned. "Margot's been friendly with the HR director lately. Very friendly." I ended the call and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. The magnitude of what was happening crystallized in that moment. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated execution. My first day back, my entry badge redirected me to the basement level. The elevator doors opened to reveal concrete floors and industrial lighting. The air smelled of chemicals and dampness. A man in a safety vest approached, clipboard in hand. "Paige Avery? Welcome to Hazmat. I'm Troy." He didn't offer his hand. "Orientation starts in 5 minutes. You'll need to complete safety certification before handling any materials." "There's been a mistake," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I never requested this transfer. I work in quality assurance." Troy's expression softened slightly. "Look, I don't know what happened upstairs, but down here, we just focus on doing our job safely. The paperwork says you're mine now." He handed me a thick manual. "Read this by tomorrow. First shift starts at 5 a.m. I spent that day in a windowless conference room watching safety videos while my replacement upstairs presented my work to department heads. Each passing hour tightened the knot in my stomach. By afternoon, I'd resolved to confront Margot directly. I found her in the executive dining area, surrounded by admiring colleagues. She looked up as I approached, her smile never faltering. "Paige, how wonderful to see you recovering so well." Her voice carried just enough for nearby tables to hear. "How are you settling into your new role?" "I never requested that transfer," I said clearly. "You know that." Margot's smile hardened at the edges. The dining area quieted as nearby executives pretended not to listen. "Perhaps this isn't the appropriate venue for discussing your confusion." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Join us. You look pale, understandable, given your recent surgery." I remained standing. My electronic signature was used on transfer documents while I was under anesthesia. "That's fraud." A man beside Margot cleared his throat. "Paige, right?" "I'm Dennis, VP of Operations." His voice carried artificial warmth. "Workplace transitions can be challenging, but change often leads to growth. Why not give your new position a chance?" "Because it wasn't my choice," I said, looking directly at Margot. "And my inspection protocol presentation, has been rescheduled," Margot interrupted smoothly. "The collaborative project our team developed needs additional testing before board review." "Collaborative?" The word burned in my throat. "You've never written a line of code for that system." "Collaborative?" The table went silent. Dennis's smile disappeared. Margot dabbed her lips with a napkin. entirely composed. Paige, I understand you're upset. Recovery can affect emotional regulation. She stood, placing a hand on my shoulder that felt like lead. Take some time to adjust to your new role. We can discuss your concerns after you've settled in. She guided me away from the table, her fingers digging into my shoulder. When we reached the hallway, her whisper was glacial. Your performance metrics simply didn't justify your position. This reassignment better matches your limited capabilities. She released me, straightening her jacket. I'd focus on learning hazardous materials handling if I were you. It's quite different from sitting at a desk all day. I will be. She walked away, heels clicking against marble floors, leaving me standing alone. Several colleagues who had witnessed the exchange hurried past, avoiding eye contact. That night, I sat in my bathtub fully clothed, letting shower water rain down until it ran cold. My career trajectory had been severed as cleanly as my appendix. The hazardous materials division operated in a separate world from the rest of the company. Located in the basement and extending into an adjacent warehouse, it processed industrial byproducts from our manufacturing lines. Every employee wore thick protective gear: heavy boots, chemical-resistant coveralls, face shields, and respirators for certain areas. On my first real workday, Troy tossed me thick gloves with rubber palms. "You'll need these more than your fancy degree now," he said, though his tone carried no malice, only pragmatic acceptance. I learned to classify waste streams, operate specialized handling equipment, and navigate the complex regulations governing chemical disposal. The work drained me physically. My surgical incision throbbed during 12-hour shifts. The irregular hours isolated me from friends, and my pay dropped 40% with the demotion. 2 weeks into my new role, the company newsletter arrived in my inbox. The main headline: Revolutionary Inspection System Set to Transform Industry Standards. Beneath it, Margot smiled beside our CEO, described as the brilliant creator of my system. My name appeared nowhere in the article. I considered quitting each morning. My alarm blared at 5 a.m. The thought of starting over somewhere else, explaining the suspicious gap in my resume, felt overwhelming. Instead, I channeled my rage into learning everything about hazardous waste regulations and environmental compliance with the same intensity I'd given quality assurance. Troy noticed. "You're not like the others they send down here," he said one day as we logged disposal manifests. "Most people transferred from upstairs spend their time complaining or searching for escape routes." "I'm not most people," I replied, studying chemical compatibility charts during lunch. "Clearly." He hesitated before adding, "Word is, you were on track for management before, whatever happened." I looked up. "You've heard rumors? This place might be underground, but gossip still filters down." He shrugged. "Someone said you designed that new inspection system that's saving millions, the one your old boss is taking credit for." My chest tightened. "And what do you think?" "I think people capable of that kind of innovation don't usually end up sorting toxic waste." He tapped my environmental compliance manual. "But maybe there's a reason you're suddenly interested in our regulatory framework." His words stayed with me. Maybe there was a reason I'd been exiled to the one department nobody from executive leadership ever visited, the place where violations could be hidden, where corners could be cut without scrutiny. I began observing our daily operations with new eyes. Chemical waste stored in unmarked containers, disposal logs with suspicious gaps, ventilation systems that frequently malfunctioned. 4 months into my basement exile, I spotted a senior manager hurrying several inspectors through our area. Their tour conspicuously avoided Section 12, where our most hazardous materials were processed. "Quarterly compliance check," Troy muttered. "Always the same route. Always the same prepared areas." That night, I used my new access badge to enter Section 12 alone. The overhead lights revealed what the inspectors never saw: drums of unlabeled chemicals stacked improperly, containment barriers in disrepair, and disposal logs showing impossible processing times. I photographed everything with my phone, heart racing. As I turned to leave, a voice stopped me cold. "Finding everything interesting?" I spun around to find Philip, our division manager, watching from the doorway. I was just familiarizing myself with all sections, I stammered, sliding my phone into my pocket. He stepped closer. Most new transfers don't show such initiative. I like to be thorough. Philip studied me, his expression unreadable. Thoroughness is valuable, but curiosity can be dangerous in this environment. He gestured around the room. These containment protocols exist for everyone's safety. Are they protocols if they're not being followed? The words escaped before I could stop them. Something shifted in his eyes, not anger but recognition. You were in quality assurance before this, correct? I nodded. Then you understand systems and compliance better than most. He lowered his voice. Some systems appear broken when viewed from certain angles. From others, they function exactly as designed. Designed by whom? I asked. Those who benefit from the current arrangement. He checked his watch. You should go home, Paige. Late nights in Section 12 aren't advisable without proper supervision. I left, but his words echoed in my mind. The next day, I began methodically documenting every violation, creating a detailed record of each regulation being broken. I researched the potential fines, the environmental impact, and the parties responsible for each decision. I discovered Margot's fingerprints everywhere. Budget requests for proper containment systems, denied with her signature. Maintenance schedules for ventilation systems, reduced under her cost-cutting initiatives. Every dangerous shortcut traced back to funds diverted to her showcase projects, including my inspection system. 7 months into my basement exile, a surprise government inspection was announced. Leadership panicked. Emails flooded our division with conflicting instructions. Emergency meetings were called. Just follow standard procedure, managers instructed nervously. But those standard procedures violated multiple environmental regulations. The morning of the inspection, I arrived early. The government representative, a stern woman named Audrey Chen, began her tour accompanied by nervous executives. When they reached my section, I approached with clipboard in hand. Good morning, I said professionally. I'm documenting today's inspection for our internal records. Margot, who had joined the tour, glared at me. That won't be necessary, Paige. Return to your station. Audrey Chen raised an eyebrow. Actually, I prefer when staff participate in these inspections. Fresh perspectives can be illuminating. She turned to me. How long have you worked in this division? 7 months, I replied. I transferred from quality assurance. Quality assurance? Audrey's interest visibly piqued. That's an unusual career path. I smiled pleasantly. It gives me a unique perspective on compliance standards. As the tour continued, I casually mentioned our chemical storage methods. I'm probably overreacting as a newcomer, but some of these containment practices seem unusual compared to regulatory guidelines. Audrey stopped walking. Could you elaborate? Margot stepped forward. I'm sure what Paige means is that our procedures exceed standard requirements. Actually, I interrupted. I was referring to Section 12, which isn't on today's tour route. The chemical compatibility issues there concerned me when reviewing the hazardous waste management regulations. Audrey consulted her clipboard. Section 12 isn't listed in the facility overview I received. That's an administrative oversight, Margot said quickly. That section is currently under maintenance and not operational. I tilted my head. Strange. I processed 3 waste shipments there yesterday. The inspection immediately transformed. Audrey requested immediate access to Section 12 and all related documentation. What began as a routine check became a comprehensive investigation that uncovered years of violations and ignored warnings from previous audits. By day's end, the government team had documented enough violations to warrant significant penalties. The CEO was summoned from a conference in another state. Emergency board meetings were scheduled. As I left work that evening, Margot cornered me in the parking garage, her face contorted with rage. You think you're clever? She hissed. You have no idea what you've done. I followed compliance protocols, I replied calmly. Something you might have considered before cutting corners to fund your career advancement. You're nothing. A disgruntled employee making trouble because you couldn't handle real responsibility. Her laugh was brittle. They'll never believe you over me. I met her gaze steadily. We'll see about that. So, don't threaten me, she snarled, stepping closer. I built my career by eliminating obstacles. People who cross me tend to regret it. Is that what happened to Michael Torres? I asked quietly. Her face paled. What did you say? Your previous assistant. The one whose mental health concerns you reported to HR right after he questioned your budget allocations. Before you transferred him to customer complaints and he eventually quit. I smiled. I've made some interesting discoveries in the compliance archives. Patterns emerge when you know where to look. She backed away. You're delusional, maybe. Or maybe I'm just thorough. I walked toward my car. See you at tomorrow's board meeting, Margot. As I drove home, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. The confrontation had left me shaken but resolute. For 7 months, I'd absorbed every humiliation, every demotion, every theft of my work. Tomorrow would change everything. I just had to survive the night with the weight of what I'd set in motion pressing down on me like a physical force. Because despite my confident words to Margot, I had no guarantee that justice would prevail. That night was the longest of my life. I spread my evidence across my apartment floor, photographs of violations, printouts of denied maintenance requests, spreadsheets tracking diverted funds, and testimonials I'd quietly gathered from former employees who'd been pushed out like me. I organized everything meticulously, creating backup copies on encrypted drives. If Margot tried to discredit me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, the documentation would speak for itself. The paper trail didn't lie. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Troy. Meeting moved up to 7:30. Executive boardroom. I replied, "Thanks for the heads up. Good luck," he wrote back. "We're all watching." I hadn't slept, but adrenaline kept me alert as I dressed in the one business outfit I'd kept after my transfer. The suit felt strange after months in protective coveralls. I gathered my evidence into a leather portfolio, another relic from my former life, and drove to headquarters. The executive floor buzzed with unusual activity for such an early hour. Administrative assistants hurried between offices. Legal counsel huddled in corners, speaking in hushed tones. I spotted the government inspectors in a side conference room, reviewing documents. Lena intercepted me near the boardroom. "Paige, what's happening?" Her eyes were wide. "The entire executive team is here, plus lawyers and those government people. The company's been violating environmental regulations." I said simply, "It's catching up to them. It's catching up to them. And you're involved?" She glanced at my portfolio. I worked in hazardous materials for 7 months. I saw things. Understanding dawned on her face. "This isn't just about your transfer, is it?" "It never was just about me." I squeezed her arm. "I need to go in now." The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 20 faces turned toward me: executives, legal counsel, government representatives, and Margot. Seated near the CEO, her complexion had the sickly pallor of someone who hadn't slept. "Miss Avery," the CEO said, gesturing to an empty chair. "Please join us." I sat directly across from Margot, placing my portfolio on the table. The government's lead inspector, Audrey Chen, began the meeting by outlining their preliminary findings. "We've documented over 200 distinct regulatory violations," she stated, her tone clinical. "Many represent significant environmental hazards and public safety concerns." Slides appeared on the screen, showing my photographs of improperly stored chemicals, falsified disposal records, and inadequate safety equipment. "The potential penalties exceed $12 million, Audrey continued. "Additionally, criminal charges may apply if we determine these violations were willful and systematic rather than accidental." The CEO's face had turned ashen. "We take compliance extremely seriously. If mistakes were made, we'll correct them immediately." "Mistakes?" Audrey raised an eyebrow. "Our investigation suggests these weren't mistakes, but deliberate policy decisions spanning at least 4 years." The company's lead counsel leaned forward. We'll need to review these allegations thoroughly before… The violations are indisputable, I interrupted, opening my portfolio. And they weren't accidental. All eyes turned to me. The CEO frowned. Ms. Avery, while we appreciate your cooperation with the inspection, this discussion is for executive leadership and legal counsel. I believe Ms. Avery's perspective is relevant, Audrey countered. She first alerted us to the Section 12 violations. Margot's voice cut through the tension. Paige is a disgruntled employee who requested a transfer to hazardous materials and then regretted her decision. Her revelations are nothing but an attempt to manufacture a workplace grievance. I never requested that transfer, I said evenly. It was processed while I was unconscious following emergency surgery. The HR director shifted uncomfortably. We have your electronic signature on the request form. A signature submitted while I was under anesthesia. I replied. Interesting timing, wouldn't you say? These personal matters are irrelevant to the compliance investigation, Margot insisted, her voice rising slightly. The company will address any legitimate environmental concerns, but Ms. Avery's employment grievances should be handled separately. The CEO looked between us, confusion evident. What exactly are you suggesting, Ms. Avery? I placed a folder on the table. For the past 7 months, I've documented every environmental violation in the Hazardous Materials Division. But more importantly, I've traced who authorized the decisions that created these violations. I slid the folder toward the center of the table. The most critical question isn't what regulations were broken, but why they were broken. The answer is simple. Money. Specifically, money diverted from compliance and safety to fund other initiatives. I opened a spreadsheet on my tablet and connected it to the room's display system. Over the past 4 years, budget requests for proper chemical containment systems were denied 6 times. Each denial redirected those funds to other departments. I highlighted specific rows. Notably, 43% of those funds were allocated to quality assurance special projects under Margot Keene's authority. Margot's laugh sounded forced. You're suggesting I personally caused environmental violations from an entirely different department? That's absurd. Is it? I pulled out another document. This is an email chain from 3 years ago, when the Hazardous Materials Division requested emergency ventilation repairs. Their request was denied by the Budget Committee based on a departmental assessment report. I looked directly at Margot, a report you authored, concluding that the repairs were optional rather than essential. The room had gone completely silent. Even the lawyers had stopped taking notes. Every compliance upgrade request was denied by her department, I continued. She claimed her initiatives couldn't spare any budget. Margot scoffed. That's ridiculous. I have no authority over waste management. Actually, I found these while organizing our compliance archives. I presented the budget denial notices bearing her authorization codes. It's surprising what you discover when you're transferred somewhere unexpected. Her face drained of color as she stared at the evidence she never imagined anyone would connect. This is a witch hunt, she said, voice trembling slightly. The Budget Committee makes collective decisions. I can't be held responsible for every denied request, except you personally overrode 3 safety upgrade recommendations after the committee initially approved them. I displayed the documents. Your electronic signature appears on each reversal, along with your justification that the funds were more strategically deployed to revenue-generating initiatives. The CEO's expression had hardened. Is this accurate, Margot? I made budgetary decisions based on company priorities, she replied defensively. Every organization balances compliance costs against operational needs. Balances? Audrey Chen interjected. You redirected legally mandated safety funding to your own projects. That's not balance. That's potentially criminal negligence. The meeting continued for hours. Additional executives were called in. Documents were scrutinized. Lawyers huddled in corners, whispering urgently. Through it all, I maintained a calm, professional demeanor, presenting evidence methodically while Margot grew increasingly agitated. By afternoon, the company's position had shifted from denial to damage control. The CEO announced an immediate compliance overhaul and full cooperation with investigators. What he didn't announce, but what became clear from the private conversations occurring around the room, was that sacrifices would be made to protect the company's broader interests. As the meeting concluded, the CEO asked Margot and me to remain behind. When everyone else had left, he sighed heavily. "Ms. Avery, I owe you an apology. Your transfer will be reversed immediately, with appropriate compensation for the irregularities in how it was handled." "Thank you," I said simply. He turned to Margot. "As for you, this is completely unfair," she interrupted. "I'm being scapegoated for systemic decisions. If you terminate me, I'll sue for wrongful dismissal." "That would be ill-advised," I said quietly. They both looked at me. During my time in hazardous materials, I discovered something interesting about our company's internal audit system. I pulled out my final piece of evidence. Every budget reallocation leaves a digital trail, including the exact time and location it was authorized. I placed a printout on the table. "This shows that on March 12th, you denied an emergency containment system repair from your home computer at 11:42 p.m. The next morning, you purchased 10,000 shares of company stock." The CEO's eyes widened. "That was the day before we announced the quarterly earnings that exceeded projections." I nodded. Earnings that were artificially inflated because compliance costs had been eliminated. The stock jumped 23%. "That's not illegal," Margot protested, but her voice had lost its conviction. "Perhaps not on its own," I agreed. "But I found 7 similar patterns over the past 3 years. Each time, you denied major safety expenditures, then purchased stock before positive earnings announcements that resulted from those cost savings." The CEO's expression had turned to stone. "That would constitute insider trading based on non-public information about manufactured earnings." "Exactly," I said. "The Securities and Exchange Commission might find that interesting, especially combined with the environmental violations those decisions caused." Margot's facade finally cracked. "You planted this evidence. No one would have connected these dots without deliberately trying to destroy me." "One," I smiled for the first time. "You're right about one thing, Margot. No one would have connected these dots if you hadn't transferred me to the one division where all the evidence was hidden." I gathered my materials. Sometimes the most dangerous place to exile someone is exactly where all your secrets are buried. 6 weeks later, I watched Margot leave the building with security escort, carrying a cardboard box of personal items. The criminal investigation into securities fraud and environmental violations was proceeding. My inspection system had been officially credited to me, with a formal acknowledgement from the company and a substantial compensation package for the administrative error regarding my transfer. As I settled back into my rightful department, now with a promotion and my own team, the HR director approached my new office. "I never understood why she would approve that transfer," she said, helping me arrange my workspace. "But I suppose some people forget that even toxic substances eventually find their proper containers." I nodded as I placed my nameplate on the desk. The company newsletter lay open beside it, featuring an article about our new environmental compliance initiatives. Initiatives I would help implement with my intimate knowledge of where the problems lurked. "You know what's ironic?" I said, looking out my window at the view Margot once enjoyed. "If she'd just shared credit for my inspection system, I would never have discovered what was happening in hazardous materials." "Greed makes people careless," the HR director replied. "Not careless," I corrected. "Arrogant." She thought I was finished, that I'd either quit or stay buried forever. She never imagined I'd use what she taught me about ruthlessness. As the HR director left, I sat at my desk and opened my computer. A message from Troy in Hazardous Materials appeared. "Division's unrecognizable now. Safety equipment actually works. People saying you're the reason. Thanks." I smiled and began typing my response. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destroying your enemy, but transforming the system they corrupted. Margot had taught me ambition. Her betrayal had taught me purpose. In the end, the appendix that had nearly killed me had given me the greatest gift, the chance to see what truly lay beneath the company's polished surface, and the opportunity to cut out the real disease. If this story moved you or made you think about the workplaces we navigate every day, please hit that like button. Have you ever witnessed someone's attempt to bury you actually give you the tools to rise higher? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you want more stories about justice, finding its way through unexpected paths, subscribe now. Sometimes our greatest setbacks hide the seeds of our most powerful comebacks. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you've turned adversity into advantage in your own life.